Good evening, it is good to see you. Was it pilot error or pilot suicide that led to the Air India crash in Ahmedabad that killed all 241 people on board except one? For the last 48 hours, ladies and gentlemen, that is the one question that is being asked not just in India but across the world after a preliminary probe report was released by the Aviation Accident Investigation Bureau, the AAIB, that reports to the Civil Aviation Ministry of India. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a reason why that question is being asked over and over again. The AAIB report that had experts from Boeing, for Air India, from GE as well, was released in the dead of the night on Friday. The 15-page report gives a virtual clean sheet to all corporates, saying very clearly that there were no mechanical or maintenance issues with the ill-fated flight. But the report does not give a clean sheet to the two pilots who are no longer around to defend themselves. Yes, it is true that the probe report does not blame Captain Sumit Sabharwal and the first officer Clive Kunder, but it doesn't give them a clean sheet either. Was the report, the question of pilot error, pilot suicide, hanging in the air? That's what the report does. It keeps questions of pilot error and pilot suicide hanging in the air. It puts out the last conversation between the two pilots, where one can be heard saying, "Why did you cut off the fuel switch?" And the other says, "I didn't do it." So that's the conversation that has been put out in the report. That's it. There is no context. There is no telling us who the pilot was who was asking the question, who was the pilot who answered, no follow-up, nothing in the report at all. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a pilot. I'm not an aviation expert. I'm even not a psychiatrist. But the pilot suicide theory or pilot error theory simply does not fly for me, and there are 6 reasons for it. Hear me out. Number 1, Captain Sabharwal, who had 15,600 flying hours under his belt, was not just a senior pilot. He was a trainer, which means he was the best of the best. To become a trainer, you go through multiple physical and mental tests, which means he was mentally absolutely fine, which also means that pilot error or pilot suicide is difficult to imagine. He had no reason to crash his plane. His neighbors say that Captain Sabharwal was looking forward to his retirement, which was just months away, so that he could look after his 90-year-old mother. So here you are, months away from retirement, hoping and dreaming that you'll look after your 90-year-old mother. Will anyone in a situation like that crash their plane? So the pilot suicide theory simply does not hold. Number 2, First Officer Clive Kunder. He was 32. He had 3,400 flying hours under his belt. He was just 2 months away from his wedding, ladies and gentlemen, just 2 months away from his wedding. Why would anyone at the cusp of a new life want to end it? Number 3, the AAIB report very clearly says that both pilots had cleared the breath analyzer test and had been found fit to fly, which means they weren't drunk. So that is ruled out as well. Number 4, consider this. The probe tells us that both the fuel switches that power the engines went off from run to cut off within a second of each other. Within a second. Ladies and gentlemen, just think about it. How is that possible, given that few controls in a plane are as heavily protected against accidental operations as the engine fuel switches? How is it possible for a pilot to switch off 2 switches that are designed to be difficult to switch off, and that too within a second of each other? Is that even humanly possible? Reason number 5 why I believe that the pilot suicide or the pilot error theory does not fly is this. If the pilot error / suicide theory was so viable, so believable, then why are airlines like Etihad today ordering a fleet-wide inspection of the locking mechanism on their Dreamliners? Clearly, they are smelling something fishy. And number 6, ladies and gentlemen, my last point, final point. The probe report itself is mentioning that in 2018, the US aviation regulator, the FAA, had red flagged potential malfunctioning of the fuel control switch for the Boeing. Yes, the FAA had not deemed it as an unsafe condition, but it had advised checks. So to say or to claim that the fuel switches did not or could not have gone off on their own will be a bit of a stretch. The pilot suicide theory, ladies and gentlemen, is not adding up for many in the aviation industry. In fact, the Pilots Association is calling the report slanted because it focuses not on possible technical problems, but on the pilots. Interestingly, the aviation minister, who the AAIB reports to, is probably uncomfortable with the report as well. Because after pilot bodies red flagged the report for insinuating pilot error, Ram Mohan Naidu stepped out to tell reporters not to jump the gun as the final report is still awaited.
I don't think we should jump into any conclusions on this. I truly believe we have the most wonderful workforce in terms of pilots and the crew in the whole world. I have to appreciate all the efforts the pilots and the crew in this country are putting into the aviation. They are the backbone of this civil aviation. They are the primary resource of civil aviation, and we care for the welfare and the well-being of our pilots also. So let's not jump to any conclusions at this stage. Let us wait for the final report.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's all very well for the minister to say don't jump the gun, don't jump to conclusions. But when a probe report clears 3 stakeholders in the crash, Air India, GE and Boeing, but remains vague about one, that's the pilots, questions are bound to be asked, and that is exactly what is happening. In this case then, are the 2 pilots being made scapegoats to protect the big fish? That's the question I'm asking my guests. But before that, this is breaking news coming in, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is huge. This is a fallout of the AI-171 probe report that was out late Friday evening. Now the DGCA has ordered all airlines that have Boeing aircrafts to carry out inspection of the locking mechanism of the fuel control switches. All airlines now have time till July 21st to conclude this entire exercise. Let me go straight across to my colleague Madhav, getting us that piece of information. Madhav, what does this mean? This is something that is flagged off in 2018, and it is only in 2025, after 241 people have died, that the DGCA is ordering an audit of sorts of the fuel control switches.
Well, this is something that was issued in 2018. You're absolutely right. The SAIB issued by the FAA. But at that point of time, it was not a mandatory order. It was, this is something that was an advisory. And advisories in that sense were not something that could have or need to have been necessarily implemented by all the airlines concerned. But given what has happened in the AAIB report, the DGCA has itself come out to note that it has come to the notice of DGCA that several operators internationally as well as domestic have initiated inspection on the aircraft fleet as per the SAIB NM 1833 dated 17 December 2018. In view of above, all airline operators of the affected aircraft are hereby advised to complete inspection required under SAIB number so and so 17 December 2018 no later than 21st of July 2025. Inspection plan and report after accomplishment of inspection shall be submitted to this office under intimation to the concerned regional office. Strict adherence to the timeline is essential to ensure continued airworthiness and safety of operations, and this is an order dated 14th of July, that is today. But I want to add one more dimension to the point that you were making earlier there, Shreya, and this is page 14 of the AAIB report. Remember that when they are referring to the cockpit voice recorder, they are referring to what is, and I'm quoting exactly from the AAIB report, in the cockpit voice recording, one of the pilots is heard asking the other, why did he cut off? The other pilot responded that he did not do so. no mention of fuel or the fuel switches in this particular recording. So is it possible that the pilots were referring to something else? Will the complete cockpit voice recorder be made public, as has been the case in other preliminary reports in different parts of the world? And will, in fact, this question be answered once and for all by the AAIB? So while they're talking about the fuel switches moving position, the cockpit voice recorder doesn't specifically mention that it is the fuel switch that they're talking about. It could be any number of other things that could have been potentially cut off, and therefore does not conclusively prove that theory in the first place, is what several experts have been telling me. Back to you, Shreya.
Madhav, we leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much. Introducing my guest to you this evening, Captain Saurabh Bhatnagar is a former A320 pilot joining us on the broadcast. Thank you, Captain Bhatnagar. Dr. Jason Knight is a senior lecturer in fluid mechanics joining us on the broadcast. Thank you very much. And Air Vice Marshal retired Nitin Vaidya is an ATC expert joining us on the broadcast. Captain Saurabh Bhatnagar, just to come to the piece of breaking news that has just come to us, that the DGCA has asked all airlines in this country to check/audit fuel switches on Dreamliners and Boeing planes. In the report that the AAIB gave, there is a clean chit to Air India, there is a clean chit to Boeing saying कि कोई mechanical failure तो है ही नहीं. There is no mechanical failure, there is no maintenance failure. If that is the case, then why this DGCA order and what does it tell us?
Good evening to you and to all the other panelists and to the viewers. First of all, in my opinion, this report is totally one-sided, biased report, and only deals towards the pilots. There is no mention, as you have said, that there could be some technical, there could be some malfunction of the signal or the erroneous signals to the FedEx to cut off the fuel supply. And I'm quite surprised how this report got leaked to the Western media 2 days back. On the 8th of July, it already was published in the Air Current, that's an online publication. They already published that the Air India probe is toward the fuel cutoff switches. Yes, and your reporter also very rightly pointed out that the CVR, which said the pilots heard saying, why did he cut off? No, that is as per the ICAO Annex 13, Chapter 7, the data has to be given, disseminated to all. Where is this data of CVR? It's a line, it's a paraphrase. You should give the exact data because the CVR records both the pilot and the co-pilot's communication separately. They're different channels. Even the switches position, switches sound is recorded in CVR. Why the AAIB has not said this? Now regarding the fuel local mechanism, the DGCA should have come up immediately. The moment the AIB has released the report, it should come up with the notice on Saturday itself. Why now? When all the pilot bodies has now started voicing their opinion, they're saying this is a biased report and it indirectly, insinuate the pilots and says, okay, it's a suicide. That is absolutely not understandable and unbelievable how this can happen. In 1 second, it is humanly not possible to put both their fuel control switches from run to off position.
Captain Saurabh Bhatnagar, I want to then ask you, you're calling this report sham, right? Captain Bhatnagar, you're calling this report sham. You are saying that the report insinuates that it was pilot error.
Sham.
I want to ask you why you think AAIB, that reports to the Civil Aviation Ministry of this country, would want to save corporates like Boeing or Air India or GE and point the finger of blame at the pilots. ये तो अपनी ही देश की Civil Aviation Ministry, right? The probe is not done by some foreigners.
But the thing is, I'm not saying, first of all, that it's a sham. I'm saying the full data has not been given. Only the data pertaining to the fuel cutoff switch and the pilot and human error. Where is the technical angle? And why was the requirement to tell Boeing and GE at this point of time that there is no requirement for any, any checks or something to be carried out at this, and to Air India? Why only the pilot thing has been mentioned here? That is why I'm saying this is incorrect. And the CVR data has to be a raw data. The ICAO very clearly mandates that if any accident which has got a high profile investigation, the data should be disseminated as soon as possible to the ICAO, to all the investigating agencies, to the states who are involved in the investigation, and to the public. Where is this data of CVR which everybody is talking about, that it is cutoff means fuel cutoff, and the pilot is saying that means now indirectly they have blamed pilots. Why? Where is the other probe which is there regarding the, yes, there has been, without, what happened to the Japan Airlines after landing when both the fuel cutoff shut-off valve was off and both the engines switched off on the runway itself, the aircraft had to be towed back. There also same thing, the fuel cutoff switches they were still in the run position. So I don't believe that what was the hurry to to save them.
Okay. Air Vice Marshal Nitin Vaidya, would you want to come in here? Two things very clearly. If we talk about pilot suicide, there has to be a reason why anyone would want to commit suicide with 241 people on board, right? For both the captain and the first officer, there is no reason. One is months away from his retirement, one is months away from his marriage. Psychologically, they have been tested. They have gone through psychiatric tests, mental tests. They have cleared all those tests, which is why they are flying the plane, right? That is very clear. So that theory doesn't hold. My point to you is, my question to you is, if all pilots that we have spoken to are saying that it is not humanly possible for a pilot or anyone to switch off 2 fuel switches within a second, which is what the report tells us happened, why blame the pilots? If it's not possible, why would you think that the pilots did it either deliberately or erroneously?
I completely agree with you, Shreya ji, the way you have put across the reasons as to why the pilots should be beyond a thought of committing suicide. And I also want to add to what Captain Saurabh Bhatnagar has said, that the report should have actually been a comprehensive one, to the extent that if you have a data which need not be any more corrected because it's a cockpit voice recorder and nothing in it can change, you might as well put it up at the first instance so that people are aware as to what conversation has taken place, and if there is any reason to come to any conclusion, it is much easier to do that. Putting up only a single statement leads to what is happening now in terms of speculation and the pilots being blamed. And like I said on your channel, that blaming somebody who is not alive is the last thing that we should be doing right now. We should be finding the right causes. And also, I fail to understand as to why the Investigation Bureau has given a clean sheet to Boeing and to the GE at the first instance. This is just not done. If you have not come to any conclusions where you do not want certain data to be not put in public, you don't make such statements where you say that, okay, these 2 people, no advisories or no intervention is required at this point of time, either from the Boeing or from the GE. But yet you give only a simple statement that one pilot said to the other and the second pilot replied. And now you leave it to the conjecture of the people to draw conclusions. And invariably, most of the people, especially the Western media, is harping on the fact that it's a pilot error. Now, I do not understand as to what is the hurry to come to conclusions before the report is finalized. And as far as not coming to a conclusion is concerned, I completely would want to believe that when so many lives are at stake, it is incorrect for the people who have been left behind and the families to go through this trauma of trying to figure out as to who's done it, why somebody has done it, and why somebody is going to be blamed for it. Than putting up a comprehensive report to the extent as what is available, so that all these things are laid to rest.
Okay. Okay. Can I just bring in my other guests as well onto this conversation? Dr. Jason Knight, you're a senior lecturer in fluid mechanics. I want to ask you what you make of the probe report, because there are many pilots in this country who are dissing it. There are family members who are calling the report vague. In fact, the general sense across India is that the report has been tailored to blame the pilots without actually blaming them. Is that your sense as well?
The preliminary report is really just to kind of state the facts. There's no real analysis in there. I don't believe it is to blame the pilots. At this stage, I think it's still unclear how the switches were activated, be it mechanical, electrical, or indeed human interaction. So at this stage, I believe that's still unclear. What is known is that the engines were starved of fuel. The switches are activated, but how they were activated is still unclear at this stage. I think what is also clear is the pilots, from the video footage and from the recordings, they clearly tried their best to save the aircraft. They had very little time, and they tried to restart the engines, and they clearly did their best to try and save the aircraft. But unfortunately, the altitude was too low, and it wasn't possible.
Dr. Knight, can I ask you, as someone who understands aviation better than most of us and understands the working of planes better than most of us, can I ask you whether it is humanly possible for anyone to deliberately or inadvertently switch off both the fuel switches within a second of each other? I thought the way this multi-billion-dollar plane is designed is to ensure that switching off a fuel switch is so difficult that it doesn't happen by error. It's designed that way. It's designed not to be switched off easily. Was it possible for it to have happened within 1 second of each other?
Yes, I mean, I'm not a pilot, so I wouldn't have thought it was possible. The pilots, when they switched the fuel back on, they did it within 4 seconds, and I would imagine that is probably the quickest you could do it. But probably, I probably wouldn't be the best person to ask. Probably a pilot would be the person to ask. But it's there's a switch and there's a locking mechanism. So there's two things that kind of need to be sort of activated. So I'm sure the Air Accident Investigation Board will be carrying out those tests. They have recovered the actual control panel and the switches themselves, and they'll check to see if there is any fault with them at all. But I think at this stage it is still too early to tell. They will no doubt sort of be investigating that.
Captain Bhatnagar, maybe you can answer that question. Whether it's whether you can switch off both the switches within 1 second of each other.
No, it is, not at all. I've been flying. I'm an Airbus 320 pilot and flying for the last 10 years. It is a similar thing is there in Airbus, which have start-stop switch. It is not possible at all to switch off manually both the switches within 1 second. Impossible. You have to, in fact, in this aircraft was this 787, the fuel control switch and other aircraft also, it's a spring-loaded switch. So as to avoid inadvertent movement, you have to lift it up from its detent or from its latch, and then you have to bring it back or forward. When it brings it back, it goes back and into the detent with the spring loaded. Against the spring, you have to lift it. So even if one switch even if you do how fast you do, it will take at least 2 to 3 or 4 seconds, 3 to 4 seconds for both the switches to put it off. It is humanly impossible. Other thing I wanted to bring you about is that the engine or the fuel cutoff switch, or the transition took place from the run to off 4 seconds after the takeoff. Now, at the time when the aircraft is taking off, when the pilot is flying, in this case, the co-pilot was the pilot flying, and the pilot in command or the left side was pilot monitoring. Now, the jobs is very, very specific as per the SOP. The pilot flying, look outside, looking for any bird, anything, and rotating the aeroplane. The pilot monitoring, look inside, and looking all the engine parameters and all the other parameters. And after takeoff, the pilot flying is waiting for the pilot monitoring to give a call of a positive rate of climb so that the landing gear can be taken up. So what I believe is at that 4 seconds, the pilot monitoring must be looking at the screen ahead and must have got some warning immediately. That is why it gives you the theory of that. It says, why did you cut off? That means he must have seen the warning straight ahead, looking at, instead of looking the switch on the central pedestal. Nobody looks at that at the time of takeoff. And why there is no, report, the mentioning of any kind of warning, any kind of oral warning, nothing is there. In the AAIB report, they just says one pilot, very vague. It has to be a raw data for both the pilots things. So that raises so many suspicions, and it means that there are so many gaps in the report which has been given in this preliminary report.
Air Vice Marshal Vaidya, my last question is to you. There are many pilots, many in the aviation industry who are saying this. They are saying the report is designed to protect the big fish, in this case Boeing, in this case Air India, in this case GE, and the pilots, the two pilots, are being made scapegoats because they are not here to speak for themselves. What's your view on that, sir?
Shreya, I certainly agree with what you said for the simple reason that if they have when I mean they, the Investigation Bureau has released only a part transcript or just a transcript which they want the people to hear, it is all insinuating towards the pilots. No other thing, neither a technical issue, nor has the airline been told to do anything, except for the fact that one pilot said to the other. And that is a very insinuating kind of an input, which is pointing towards that there is some kind of a pilot error. So obviously the pilot guild is got into action, and they are questioning as to why this report has come only in the part phase, and also they are thinking of going to the court to take the matter to the court. So obviously, when you have only part report given, and that too only that which contains a talk from one pilot to the other, it points to the fact that they are trying to head the direction of the thought in a particular way. Okay. And unfortunately, here it is the pilots who are concerned. There is nobody else in the moment.
All right. We'll leave it there for the moment, ladies and gentlemen. We are being told don't jump the gun. We are being told that wait for the final report to come out. This is only a preliminary report. How long will the final report take to come out? Ladies and gentlemen, 1 year. So till 1 year, we'll have all these questions hanging in the air, troubling all those people who have lost loved ones in that unfortunate crash in Ahmedabad, including the families of the two pilots. We'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you. Thank you very much, Air Vice Marshal Vaidya, for joining us. Dr. Jason Knight, thank you very much. And Captain Saurabh Bhatnagar, thank you. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, a quick break. There's more news on the other side. Do stay with us.